You wondering who will be diving into the stuffing less than 2 times? Or who will be eating more than 3 pieces of pie on Thanksgiving? Well, then you got to play the Pick 6 game from DraftKings. Your shot to turn a little cash into a lot. It's super simple to get started. First, download the DraftKings Pick 6 app, now available in Texas, California, and more. Then select between 2 or more players and choose if they'll have more or less than a certain stats, like yards or touchdowns, sacks, whatever. You choose if they're going to have more or less. And for the first time, Pick 6 players, check this out. New customers play $5. You get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use the code BALLERS. That's the code BALLERS for new customers to play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus bets awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 30 days. Limited time offers. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
This episode is brought to you by Instagram. Though we can't all agree on our picks, we can all agree that we want social media to be a safe place for teens. So it's good to hear about Instagram teen accounts, which provide automatic safety settings for teens built with parents' top concerns in mind. Things like making their teens' profiles private by default, having automatic contact limits so they can only be messaged by people they are connected to, and content restrictions that place them in the most restrictive setting, limiting sensitive content they see in places like Explore and Reels. And all of these settings are built in, so no extra work for parents. Instagram is automatically placing teens into teen accounts, and teens under 16 will need a parent's permission to change any of these settings to be less strict. Basically, Instagram teen accounts will limit who can contact teens and the content they see and help ensure teens' time on the app is well spent. And that's something everyone can agree on.
The DFS Studio is brought to you by DraftKings. Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast with your hosts, Kyle Borganoni and Matthew Betz.
Welcome back to Week 16 here on the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni, and I'm joined by my dog and Matthew Anytime Touchdown Betz.
Ozzy making his first appearance on the show. Oh man, that's got to be a good sign. I don't know which player he's barking for or who he's excited about, but obviously he's got some takes to get off his chest today on the show. So I'm excited to see what you have to say, Kyle, about this slate, and obviously Ozzy. It's, I think, a really fun slate for tournaments because it kind of feels like, and we'll talk about cash here in a sec, but like with some of the cheaper, quarterback plays opening up, maybe some cheaper running back plays, it kind of feels like that's going to be the roster construction that a lot of people use in cash. But I was building before the show, and there's a lot of fun teams you can build if you're willing to get off of that. So there's a lot of ways to attack this slate, I think, for tournaments.
I would agree with you, my friend. And I also have thought many times, man, I need to sit down and write some strategy articles for the Foot Clan, for the DFS Pass members, because there's just so much this year that I feel like is good teaching points. And I'm not trying to belittle anyone. Like myself, I was a high school teacher, if you didn't know. And so a lot of the times I think I enjoy connecting the dots for people. And I think for cash this year, and cash lately, has been, what is the field doing? How do I anticipate that? How do I anticipate roster percentages? And then look at a giant slate like this. Like last week, we talked about how, man, there's a lot of different ways you can go with wide receivers. I think it's the same way this week. And now there's probably 4 or 5 running backs that I really like. There's one running back that when the cards are turned over, everybody's going to have Jahmyr Gibbs. Okay, it's like you're just conceding that. And there's nothing wrong with knowing that information ahead of time. But there's a quarterback now on the scene that we're going to talk about that has completely shifted this slate, just turned it on its head, man.
Oh man, I'm ready to hear what you have to say about the future of Atlanta. Michael Penix under center this week against the Giants. What is he? 4,500 on DraftKings, 6K on FanDuel. It's hard not to project pretty well at those price tags. So yeah, we'll talk about it here in a minute. But I did enjoy, like, just sometimes, these athletes, they're superhumans. They're doing things physically that I could never even imagine being able to do. But I've been at Costco a time or two with the wife. Sometimes the kids are there, and yeah,
a dog or two.
The dog's there. the soft serve ice cream, not bad, right? Like, we've all been there. So the fact that he got the call of saying, "Hey, Michael, you're in, buddy," and he's like about to put ketchup on his hot dog at Costco, I just feel like I connect to Mr. Penix so much more now.
Man, I wish I would have been there, because I know where Cousins and Penix are in the state of Georgia. I've been to that Costco, and I just would have loved it if I just been walking around. Dude, that's Michael Penix. Dude, you want to share a dog? And it's actually me. And I'm like, dude, let's like bond. Let's talk about this together. I obviously have his jersey, and all of a sudden he spurns me of eating a dog with me. Like, that could have been the scene.
Do you think if you were at that Costco and you saw him, what would you do? Would you just like play it cool and be like, I mean, I know that's who that is, I don't want to bother him, or would you fanboy and try to get an autograph or something?
Oh, I play it cool. I like the attitude of act like you've been there before. That's kind of my not like arrogance, but like when I'm around people that are a little bit more esteemed, famous athletes, whatever, I try to play it as like, hey, I get where you're at. No worries. Like, I don't need that in my life. Right now, I have someone who thinks the world of me, and they're at my feet. That's my dog, Ozzy. Like, that's good enough for me.
I love that, Kyle. Keeping it simple.
Yeah, this is good stuff. So we'll talk about this Week 16 slate, some of the plays, how to break it up. As you know, we'll walk through some of the games, which, man, I'm going to miss breaking down football games with you a couple months from now. It's like, that's what you and I go back and forth on. That's, I think, what we've taught people, how to look at a game, find the different game flows. But we still have a couple more weeks. We still have the playoffs, and those games will be really fun to break down. So all of those things are at dfspass.com. Still don't know why. I mean, have you been to the HR meetings recently?
No, haven't gotten invited, so that's not a good sign.
No, I got a memo on my desk that just says, "We don't care about you guys. We're going to keep slashing the price." That's all it said.
I mean, I don't have words at this point. Everybody knows how I feel. It is what it is.
Let's be honest. HR has not even shown up to work this week because Mike has been so sick.
How about
the
that?
Entire week.
Yeah, how about that, HR? Show up to work. He didn't even put in a time off request for himself.
To himself?
Yeah. So that's not approved.
Bad practice. Okay, well, you and I, the next step is to do what Dwight would do, which is just citizen's arrest. We just need to
show up at Mike's house.
We need to go to Mike's house and just say, "You're arrested," and this isn't cool. But dfspass.com, all of our picks, everything is in there, and they will go throughout the playoffs. We think that not only does it pay for itself, but it pays about, I don't know, for some people 20 times, 100 times over. It's pretty nice. It's nice when you see people, like I got a message the other day and someone won like 30K. And I was like, oh, that's a good little day. And nice little side job you picked up during the football season.
I love that for people. So fun.
I do too. So let's get into it.
Straight cash, homie.
We're going to start off talking about quarterback, and the big question mark is Michael Penix, who is the stone man at 4,500. He's 6K on FanDuel. And Betz, I have to ask you the question. Do you believe that he is the greatest quarterback of all time?
If I play him in cash, I will believe he is and hope that he is. What's interesting, right, is like, so it's an awesome spot. I mean, it's the Giants. They're at home. They've got a high team total. They're favored. He's
the place
cheap.
is going to be rocking.
The building is going to be electric. I actually do kind of think the building will have a nice buzz because they're excited about their quarterback. But in all seriousness, like, it is a clean spot, and all of his guys are healthy, right? So you really can't poke any holes like in the situation itself. From a play calling standpoint, I don't think we should copy and paste and say, okay, Kirk Cousins is out, Penix is just going to sling it. Teams have decided to, for the most part, run on the Giants for the majority of the year. prior to, I haven't looked for updated this week, but like entering this past week, I think the Falcons were 31st in pass rate over expectation over the last month.
That is correct.
So I do think you'll see limited dropbacks for Penix, assuming they control the game, get Bijan going, and all those things. But at 4,500, like what do you need from him, right, to be viable in cash? 12 points, 13 points. I think if you get 16, 17, you're really happy. So I think he's a pretty good cash play. I do see a path, though, for tournaments where he doesn't really give you slate-breaking upside that you can't match elsewhere in your lineup, if that makes sense. So, I mean, you're the Atlanta guy. Where are you at with Penix? I think it's a good spot. He definitely is in my like first cut or two for cash games.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pricing thing. We have played dudes way worse than Michael Penix. I mean, you're probably hearing this saying like, oh, we've never seen this guy play football. His lines on DK right now, his passing yardage is at 229.5. His passing touchdowns, I was surprised. It's at 1.5, minus 15 on both sides. So I think I would take the under there. But I think at the end of the day, what do you need him to do at 4,500? You need 12 to 15 points. And if you got that, you know, he gets 200 yards, throws a touchdown. I don't know, maybe runs a little bit.
I don't think he's going to run.
It's an interesting proposition, though, because you look at the field and you see the other options that are a little more expensive, right? We talked about Anthony Richardson. I think he's a good play at 5,400. Kyler's a step up from there. That's kind of the stairs that I'm seeing. Kyler at 6,100, Richardson at 5,400, Penix at 4,500. It works, though. Like, I've made lineups where Penix is in there. I'm saying, get me 12 points, and then I'm able to pay up for like 3 studs. And the lineup looks really, really good. Let me ask you like the psychological question. When you flip over the cards and you're playing someone ahead, let's say like, I don't know, you took some guy named K. Borganoni in the lobby, and this guy's just trying to bully you in head-to-heads. You're assuming, I don't know, 50% of the time when you do head-to-heads that it's going to be Penix?
Probably more, I would
40?
think. Yeah, probably.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, just because, like, there's some cheap plays that I think are viable. We'll talk about some of the running backs that might open up. But, like, wide receiver, again, there are okay plays, like, in the 4K range that you could talk yourself into, but none that are slam dunks. And, you know, at tight end, we're going to talk about Brenton Strange. He's in the conversation this week. So it's like, besides Strange as, like, the cheap punt that's available for cash games, I think a lot of the mid-5s for wide receivers very strong. We're going to talk about Jamar Chase, unbelievable spot for him. There's some expensive guys at wide receiver I really like. There's incredible running back plays that I want to get to. So I think just the savings lets people feel more confident about their lineup. So I do think Penix will be pretty popular in cash games. I think for the most part, it's going to be Anthony Richardson or Penix, I believe.
Yeah, and I don't blame anybody for constructing your roster and saying, hey, I need $100. I think Penix is the better play. I think Richardson's floor is higher than what we're giving credit. And then there's actually a ceiling outcome for him. With Penix, like, you know, if you got 20 points, you'd just be over the moon to get that. Where Richardson could get 25, and it's really the range of outcomes. So play around with your lineups. I have my Penix jersey sitting right behind me.
You going to be wearing it on Sunday?
I'll be wearing it. I'll be excited about it. Now, I will say about Kirk, he's handled this like a pro. He didn't play like a pro, but he's handled this like a pro. And he said all the right things. He's a really nice guy. He also, did you see the quote? He wants to be the best QB2 in the league.
That is adorable. I mean, Kirk is...
No, you can't be mad at this guy.
I love Kirk, man. Yeah, it's tough, right? 'Cause he's gotten a lot of pushback over the years of just like, where does he rank among starters in the league and all that conversation, and people give him a hard time because he's made an unbelievable amount of money in his career.
$300 million.
With his guaranteed contracts. But like, if you've had Kirk Cousins as like your NFL franchise that you're a fan of as a starter, he's been productive no matter where he's gone, except for this year. So yeah, Kirk's been great. Always a bummer when this happens to veterans late in their career, but maybe he bounces back next year. We'll see.
We live in a really weird world where everybody has an opinion because we're sharing it on social media and everything else. But Kirk Cousins has been a good NFL quarterback for a long time.
For sure.
It's not like just like he had one good year and that's it. So compared to the majority of people in the NFL and then compared to the majority of human beings, he deserves some respect. Like, I'm on Team Kirk. Maybe it's also because he's here in Georgia and he like relocated here for his family here in Georgia. I'll fight for Georgia boys, man.
Always will. Yeah, real quick before we move on with A-Rich, you mentioned the floor. I do think the floor is very high. And by floor, I mean like even if he's terrible, like he's probably giving you at least 10 DraftKings points, right? Because he's just running so much.
This is where we're at with quarterback 10 points.
Please give me 15 points. But hey, if you give me 10, we could be alive. He's averaged since he was benched and came back, he's averaging 9 rush attempts, 47 rushing yards per game, and he scored 4 times in 4 games with his legs. On top of that, 13 red zone rush attempts, 6 carries inside the 10-yard line. So again, it's hard for him to be truly like the reason you lost in cash games, if that makes sense. Like you talked about, if he runs in 2, he definitely has more upside. So I agree with you. And it's not really an imposing matchup against the Titans, right? They're kind of middling in a lot of the metrics. So I think so mid, unbelievably mid. So I think Richardson at home in the Dome is quite strong as well. But yeah, if you need the $900, I think Penix is fine.
Okay, we spent a long time on quarterback because I think it is a point this week of if you unlock that, it changes the rest of your roster. There will be some people that want to pay up for Josh Allen because of what he's done the last 2 weeks. On FanDuel, I get it. The pricing is a little different in how it works, but there are just so many other running back plays that we want in our lineups this week. So Jahmyr Gibbs is the first name we're going to mention at 7,500. We talked about him on Tuesday. It's a great matchup. He's going to get a ton of work. I would be very interested to see where he comes in for tournaments, what the roster percentage is, because you gain a ton of leverage here because everybody has basically said this is it. Same thing with James Conner. A great play at home against the Panthers, who are on track to allow the most rushing yards of all time. I just love thinking about builds and then going into tournaments and say, okay, well, everybody is just banking on this is a smash spot. Last week, it was Chuba and Rico. Rico was fine. If you just ignored those 2 plays and played other guys at running back, you had so much leverage on the field. So in cash, I think Gibbs and Connor are probably going to be my 2 favorites. And then I like Bijan too.
No disrespect to Rico and Chuba. They are not Jahmyr Gibbs, who might be the most explosive back in the league. I really can't fathom not playing him in cash. So if you're listening to this over the weekend and you get to Sunday and like your team does not have Gibbs in it, I strongly think you should reconsider because he is going to be 75+% in double ups and for good reason. And yeah, in tournaments, that's the conversation, right? It's like, how much Gibbs do you play? And in small field, like I think he's going to push 50%. So it's an awesome matchup. Last year without Monty, he did average 23 touches. You get 23 touches against this Bears defense that, is really struggled. They're giving up a ton of explosive runs. He can catch the ball. He's got the goal line roll, plays for one of the best offenses in football. Like there's literally no holes you can poke in Jahmyr Gibbs outside of a game theory play of what if he fails. The other thing though is like, if they get into a shootout, if Caleb can hold up his end of the deal, I mean, the defense, right, is so ravaged by injury, like then you get Gibbs with all this PPR volume. So I'd be very scared not to have Gibbs in cash. I agree with you on James Conner. Awesome spot. Favorite against Carolina in the same game. Chuba, equally good matchup against Arizona, is really interesting. Chase Brown, he's literally getting everything for the Bengals.
He's an RB1 for 6 straight weeks.
He's getting everything for the Bengals and the Browns. They're playing for the NFL draft and they're playing DTR. So I think you could see a ton of short fields for the Browns offense. You can catch the football. Like those guys are just so strong. Gibbs, Chase Brown, Chuba, James Conner, and then Bijan, right? Like Bijan favored by 8.5 at home against the Giants. Like these plays are all so strong. And I guarantee I'm going to be so stressed all weekend trying to figure out which are the 3 to play. And I hope you understand, Kyle. I will probably choose wrong and be very upset next week. But that group of 5 right there is just incredibly strong.
Yeah, the issue is you look at your lineup, it looks good, and then you look at someone else like, man, but what if I don't have Bijan? Or what if I guess wrong on the Connor Chuba, discussion back and forth? Like earlier in the week, we talked about Aaron Jones as a great price tag. I think he's not going to be played a ton in cash, but I think he's a great play as well. So it kind of comes down to, based on you paying down at quarterback and likely paying down at tight end, you have enough to be able to get at least 2 of these stud running backs, and maybe, Chase fits in there too, Jamar Chase. That can work. So Chase Brown's just, his salary keeps going up, but he's justified at 7,700. Like it makes a ton of sense. So play around with those. I'm not really trying to circle for cheap running backs, but I will say this: we're recording on a Thursday. Things will change. We might get a cheap running back here or there. There's some guys that I'll write up as tournament plays that I love as tournament plays this week. They're going to get lost in the shuffle. And that's how you play DFS. You look at this and go, there's 5 running backs everybody's playing. Well, there's probably another 5 that are really good plays too. So any last thoughts on running back?
Do you want to hit on the Niners situation quickly? Because we got some questions in Discord about it. And this is kind of natural in DFS. Like as soon as there's an injury, everybody's like, all right, who's the backup to play? It's really cheap. It could be really fun. If you missed the news, Isaac Guerendo is unlikely to play with the hamstring injury. Of course, no CMC, no Jordan Mason, no Elijah Mitchell, no Guerendo is likely the situation this week for the Niners. It's a pretty good game environment against the Dolphins where it could go back and forth. The RB room as it stands as of this recording, Patrick Taylor, Izzy Abanikanda, who was signed on December 3rd off of the Jets, who, he didn't really play at all this year, and Keyshawn Vaughn was on the practice squad. So I think there's going to be some people that are like, hey, could I play Patrick Taylor? I would just caution you and say, like, I don't think it's a lock that he is going to get the bell cow role. I think it's potentially possible, but I think you could see some of Abanikanda. I think Vaughn could touch the ball. I think Debo could be like their RB1 this week in this matchup. So are you interested at all in Patrick Taylor? Because he is cheap, and people are going to ask about it.
No, it never does. I mean, these people somehow delude themselves into thinking it might, but it might work for us.
That is exactly how I feel. Is like, who are you confidently going to say is the dude?
I can't. Unless we get news, which, I mean, that there will never be like definitive news on this, but unless we get some sort of confidence from the team, which, from the Niners never really happens, I don't think you can feel confident that you're definitely getting a workload here.
It's just, I mean, the lines moved in a way. I mean, the Niners are just favored by 1. They're on the road. It's just, I just don't think you have to do it. And when you look at your lineup this week, if you're paying down at more than 2 spots, I think you're doing it wrong. So if you're paying down at quarterback and tight end, cool. If you're paying down at tight end and a punt wide receiver, cool. But I don't think you need to, because you're going to flip over the cards and you're going to see 3 awesome running backs in another lineup.
Good. I'm glad you brought that up, right? There's so much opportunity cost. If you're playing Patrick Taylor instead of James Conner, now the salary is different, of course, but like that just feels bad. Or like Patrick Taylor over Gibbs, right? Like that kind of situation, those decisions, which I think listeners of this show are smart. They've played for the entire year. They know, but there will be people idiots that do those silly things. So yes, I'm with you. I think it's probably a little bit too much of like a fancy play syndrome type of thing for cash games.
All right, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
The holidays are about spending time with your loved ones and creating magical memories that will last a lifetime. So whether it's family and friends you haven't seen in a while, or those who you see all the time, share holiday magic this season with an ice-cold Coca-Cola. Copyright 2024, The Coca-Cola Company.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in places that could expose you to identity theft. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, their US-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
After all these years, there's one thing that I can be confident in, that we don't have idiots listening to our show, Matthew.
Sure don't. These people are smart, sophisticated. They know ball.
They've got their hand in the dirt while they're listening to this podcast, excited about us talking about wide receivers. If you want to pay up for Jamar Chase, he's winning the Triple Crown right now. So I don't know what to tell you other than $8,500 is not expensive enough. If you wanted to go there, you could do it. I'm looking at how people might construct their rosters this week, and we always find that dipping into the 5K range is what you love doing. You're like, oh, I need to save somewhere. Where's somewhere I can get a lot of targets? Oh, let me go in this range. There's a couple of dudes that are around 6K, 5K that I think fit that bill. DJ Moore is probably one of my favorites. He saw 16 targets against these Lions on Thanksgiving. I think it's a really good spot for him. I like him over Keenan. Don't tell him I said that, but I like DJ Moore over Keenan in this spot. Juwan Jennings at 5.9. And then if it's AOC, we can go with your boy Jacoby Myers.
Yep, that trio looks very strong in the mid-range. I'm with you. Juwan Jennings has seen a 20+% target share in 6 straight games. Now you take out another weapon in Garendo. Debo's playing the worst ball of his career. Jennings looks awesome. DJ Moore looks like a slam dunk play, in my opinion. Carlton Davis, another IR injury for the cornerback position for the Lions. 6.5 point underdogs they're going to be throwing. If you need the 400 to go down to Keenan, I think it's fine, but I'm with you. I prefer DJ Moore. Please, nobody tell Keenan that Kyle and I are fading. And then if you want to go up a little bit further, Brian Thomas Jr. is playing like a complete alpha at this point, and he gets the Raiders in the Dome. So I don't know that I would want to show up with Brenton Strange and Brian Thomas Jr.
No.
And trust a Mac Jones double stack. I mean, it worked last week, but maybe for a tournament. But for cash games, I think it's one or the other. But just to reiterate again, there's no weapons. It's Gabe Davis gone, Christian Kirk gone, no Evan Ingram. Brian Thomas Jr. has seen 10, 12, and 14 targets over the last 3 weeks since the bye. If these trends continue, Kyle, we're getting 16 targets this week.
Does that game change at all if it's Desmond Ridder?
Oh, yes. I would be.
Does that change about the Jaguars' options?
Well, I think they'd still be cash viable, but I would not be as excited to stack them up in tournaments.
Okay. JSN is in no man's land. I don't know why he's still priced down at 6K. He leads the league in slot receptions. I don't know if you know this. Hot stat here. CeeDee Lamb, who had an otherworldly season, should have won Offensive Player of the Year last year. He led the entire league in slot receptions with 69 of them. But JSN already has 70 on the season. He's on track for the second most slot receptions over the last decade, only to Cooper Kupp's amazing season. So he's awesome. And at 6K, that is a misprice if we're going to get Geno. Do we have an update on Geno?
So we're recording this before they have their Thursday practice, but he was back full on Wednesday. So barring an unforeseen setback, I do think Geno's going to be out there. And you did see the line move. When we talked on the Tuesday show, we had mentioned, it was 3.5 in favor of the Vikings. It's now down to a field goal. And I was concerned because, Sam Howell just takes so many sacks. You lose, the drive will stall out a bunch. He's not accurate, all those things. With Geno, I feel rock solid about JSN, and kind of thinking about the way the Vikings operate with pressure and the blitz, who are you going to go to in those situations? It's JSN. So I am very strongly considering a slate breaker, Kyle, of JSN this week. Not to tease it, but I've got 4 names on the list, and he's on the short list for sure.
He is always, he's slowly becoming in my top 3 or 4 favorite players in the league. And understand there are players that have a soft spot in my heart. Cade will always. Now, Cade is not in my top 3 or 4 favorite players in the league, but I love Cade Otton. But we're at this stage with Keenan where I can't, it's not the same, It's you were dating for a while, things were good, things have changed. You just don't have that fire anymore.
What's hilarious is I'm noticing a trend. Keenan,
slot wide receivers
who just get a ton of volume. Keenan, for years, right? Now, then it was Amon-Ra for me, who's now kind of he's in his prime, and now you're getting JSN emerging as the young guy. So
you're a Wandale guy?
Oh, Wandale. That dude. Hunter Renfrow a couple years ago.
Dude, Renfrow was fun. No, Wandale, I hate watching him play football.
I'm going to be so happy if somehow the Falcons lose this game. I'm sorry, Kyle. And Wandale Robinson scores.
Wandale. That's what's going to happen. It's totally going to be Wandale. Play DJ Moore on FanDuel as well. He's an even better value on that site. And you can find all of our values in our best plays article on the site. At tight end, got to bring this up now. We're going to talk about it again later. But the entire internet is abuzz for the fact that this man could score a touchdown this week. It's Trey McBride. You, your mama, the person down the street that just opened up their sportsbook account probably placed a bet on Trey McBride to score a touchdown. His anytime touchdown bet, which we took for the second week in a row, was at plus 210. Do you know what it's at right now?
I'm going to guess plus 150.
Plus 135.
Oh my.
It's bad now.
Do not play that if you're out there. Those are terrible odds.
Yeah, it's terrible. And I want it to happen for the internet's sake. But guys, Everybody's calling this because we're calling it every single week. We want to be the person. Everybody wants Trey McBride to get a touchdown. He's a fine play if you want to play him at 6.2. He's on my main league roster. I'm in the semifinals. I want a touchdown. At 6.2, I think he's a good play, but I think people will be paying down.
Yeah, I don't think you have to have him in cash. I do think he's an incredibly strong play. The Panthers have allowed the most fantasy points to tight ends because they've given up the most touchdowns to tight ends. So, yes, we did take the anytime touchdown. Yes, I am rooting for that. But there are ways you can get off of it in DFS where, like, you know, he could still give you 5 for 50 and a touchdown, but like you didn't need him to win a tournament, right? So careful with the touchdown chasing. It's so funny. Everything on Twitter is about, you know, Kyler Murray put an Instagram post about it, and now everyone's, you know, using that as a narrative. Of course, the actual data says he should be scoring touchdowns. So it's the fire is ablaze, so to speak, for the Team McBee steam this week. I could see him getting really, really popular in DFS, but it's a great matchup. I think he'll be less rostered than James Conner, so that is interesting to me for leverage. But yes, he's a great play, but I don't think you need him in cash. I do think most people are going to play Brenton Strange. He's 3,500. Penn State great, obviously. Taking on the Raiders, it's a good matchup. We have seen Strange play, let me see my notes here, 5 games where he's played more than 68% of the snaps. Those games, 6 targets, 5 targets, 3 targets, 4 targets, 12 targets.
I like the 12 more.
I would just be careful chasing last week. You know, I think that was probably the outlier. It is worth noting, though, last week he did play 82% of the snaps, ran around on 78% of Mac Jones' dropbacks. So it's a good matchup. I think you're probably getting somewhere in the 6 to 8 target range. And for that price tag, like that's pretty nice.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I'm not playing Strange and BTJ together. I want to play BTJ. My heart says it, but I think Strange feels like I can just punt this off. Everyone else is going to chase. I'll just concede this point too. That's like all you're really doing with some of these plays. You're just conceding that, I don't know, 50% of the field plays Brenton Strange, even though they've never heard his name before last week. So Hunter Henry is fine on FanDuel. That's fine too. I will say at defense, I don't love the plays, man. Like it's actually really hard this week.
Agreed. Yeah. Like usually there's like 1 or 2 like in the 2,800 range that you can feel pretty confident about. I actually kind of think Buffalo is going to project the best. I still get an uneasy feeling about spending $3,600 in cash games, but they're favored by 14 points at home against, you know, Drake May, who's going to, you know, make mistakes and throw picks and take sacks. So I like that one. And then you could talk me into Cincy at home against Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who, you know, in 3 starts last year, averaged 3.9 yards per pass attempt. So those 2 look pretty good to me. Do you see anyone cheaper that you like?
I mean, I talked on Tuesday that Chicago is interesting for their price if you want to go all the way down there at 2,200. There's a lot of other options, like the Jets are 2,500. Okay, it's fine if you want to punt it off. I just don't know what the field is going to do because the best options really are paying up. And we usually recommend don't doing that at all. So I don't know. I might just letting you know, I might emotionally hedge because I have the Bills as my defense in my main matchup. I might just play them there and then play somebody else in DFS. That's how this works.
No matter what, Kyle, you'll be happy.
It's great advice too.
Super helpful for people.
Super helpful advice. On FanDuel, I would play the Falcons because they're 4K and they're mispriced.
Yep. At home, taking on Drew Lock makes a ton of sense.
All right, moving on.
Stack Attack.
We are going to talk about the games that we want to stack up this week. The first one we're going to talk about is the Detroit Lions at the Chicago Bears. The Lions are 6.5 point road favorites. The over-under is 48. We saw these two teams play on Thanksgiving. That was the game, if you don't remember. It was Matt Eberflus's last game. They didn't know how to use timeouts or how the things worked. Caleb still doesn't understand it. Actually, I did some research. Caleb doesn't understand how first halves work at all.
I read your splits that you talked about in pace before we started recording, and I like just watching the games, you kind of feel that, but like the data behind it was wild. Yeah, you should share some of that.
That's one of the things that I love about researching football is like you're watching the games, you're like, man, it feels this way. Let me look up the numbers. But in the first halves this year, he has 4 passing touchdowns total. in 14 games. In the second half, he has 13. Much more respectable. And you felt that, like these end of the game backdoor moments. What's also hard to figure out is that when we looked at this game in Detroit a couple weeks ago, it was like, oh man, like this Detroit defense, you can't run on them, can't do all this stuff. Like they have so many injuries that we kind of have to rethink a lot of their metrics. Like we can't use Detroit passing metrics from week 6. It doesn't matter anymore. We also have to think about how this game's in Chicago, and the Bears defense also looks a lot different. Like it's bad now. The Bears defense was a team that we said early in the year, man, you don't want to go in there. You don't want to play against them. They're going to be in these low scoring. It's kind of been the opposite. So how do you want to attack this game from a stacking perspective?
Yeah, real quick, speaking to the defensive metrics and that kind of thing. So since week 12, which, we're entering week 16, it's not a huge sample size, but it does kind of speak to like the injury situation for the Lions and the recent poor play of the Bears. These defenses are 26th, that's the Lions, and 28th in EPA per play defensively. So I do think this is a good spot for both offenses, contrary to like what we think about Caleb and how he's played. And, it hasn't looked pretty. The offensive line is a train wreck, like all that stuff. But just, it's kind of historic what's happening on the defensive side of the ball for the Lions. And they're putting up points, right? The Lions they always do. They got one of the best offensive lines in football. Goff is playing at an MVP caliber. He's not going to win it because Josh Allen is doing his thing, but he's playing super well. Amon-Ra is healthy. J-Mo's healthy. Like, all the guys are there. And then you think about, okay, no Montgomery. Do they trend a little bit more pass heavy in this spot with Gibbs as kind of that focal point in the pass game? That makes sense to me. And so I do think you could just onslaught it on the Lions side. Like, you could play Gibbs with Amon-Ra and Jared Goff. If you wanted to play a low-rostered Jameson Williams with Gibbs and just say you try to soak up all the touchdowns that way, like I definitely think that's viable. So for me, it's not a matter of who's the good play, who's the bad play. It's just, like, these are all really good plays, I think, on the Lions side of the ball, and trying to figure out how roster percentage is going to work is going to dictate how I play them in tournament, if that makes sense. Just look for the low roster guys.
Yeah, and I think with Goff, the narrative's always been, well, he's not at home, he's not in a dome, he's going to be bad. I think the thing I care about more is that he's just always slayed against cover 3. And that's what Chicago runs a ton. I mean, he's led the league in passing yards for 3 straight years against this. And Chicago has given up a ton of big plays recently. So, like, I was looking at J-Mo and like, man, his splits on the road aren't great. He's this boom-bust player. Sweet. If nobody's playing him in DFS, then you add him on as the third piece. You go Goff, Gibbs, J-Mo. Or if you want to get off Gibbs and you're saying, hey, it's Amon-Ra and J-Mo, like, I'm totally fine with that, and playing DJ Moore on the other side. Because Gibbs and DJ Moore are going to carry a ton of roster percentage, but I don't think people are going to play a lot of Goff stacks. So I think that's the best way to attack this game, is to like figure out the passing piece. Sam Laporta, I think, is a fine play too on DK at 4,700 if you wanted to go that direction too.
For sure, yeah. And just real quick on Jameson Williams, he's a good play on both sides. He's a really strong value on FanDuel, 6,100 there, and it kind of fits his skill set a little bit better, I think. And he's 5,500 on DraftKings. So relatively speaking, he's a really strong play over on FanDuel. I'm also with you on Laporta. The Bears have given up a ton of production to tight ends. So, I mean, obviously you're not playing all these guys in the same lineup, but I think you kind of want to like mix and match across. If you're playing a 20 max or 150, like you want exposure to a bunch of these guys this week.
And if you're playing the Caleb side, I mean, the pricing works at 5,500. He's going to be played a little bit, but Caleb, DJ Moore, and then find the third piece if it's Keenan or Roma Doomsday. Oh, if it's Kmet, like, I don't know. Like, I'm fine with that. And then you bring it back with Gibbs. That works. Now, the way that the Lions play defense, a lot of man coverage. And remember when we talked about that game, I was like, man, his skill set doesn't work in tighter windows. And I was like, does this actually match? Like, I'm seeing this in the game, and then I looked this up. He ranks 39th out of 40 qualifying quarterbacks in catchable targets versus man coverage. He's also taken more sacks than anybody else in the league. However, for DFS, we've seen this backdoor moment where he's like third and fourth quarter able to kind of run the table and rack up some yardage. So I don't mind Caleb at all. I just probably won't have as much exposure. There's just so many other dudes this week.
For sure. And I do think it's a good play. It's a good value too. I mean, you know me and the value stacks, Kyle. Caleb on DraftKings pricing here, it's 5,500 for Caleb. DJ Morris 5,700. Keenan Allen is 5,300. That double stack right there is pretty cheap. Roma Dunze also 5,100. I will say just my hesitancy on this is like if people are playing Caleb, they're almost definitely playing him with DJ Moore, which is fine. And they're probably playing him with Keenan. So like you're eating a lot of roster percentage there. And if you bring it back with Gibbs on the other side, he's going to be, I think, the most popular running back play on the slate. So just be mindful of that. Not saying you can't do it, but just make sure if you are going to play that, you need to get different elsewhere.
All right, give me your Vegas take.
I like, just because both defenses have been so bad, I actually kind of like the over here. I will take over 48 points.
I don't mind that either. 6.5 is an interesting line. Like I kind of want to take the Bears at home.
It does
but
feel
I also don't
don't too obvious, right? It's like the Lions should obviously win this game by a touchdown.
I will take the Bears like for our pick 'em for our league. I'll probably do plus 6.5. But that's why they call me the Lions and the sides and totals guy.
You are so sharp, Kyle, with your lines and totals. All right, so over in Bears. That's what we're going with.
That's what we're going with.
All right.
That's how I'll play it, at least. DFS.
Like it.
All right, next game is super important. Could not be more important. It's the NFC showdown, NFC East showdown of the Philadelphia Eagles and the Washington Commanders. The Eagles are 3.5-point road favorites. The over-under is 45.5. And the lasting image we have in our brain is when these two teams met, week 11, week 12, whenever it was, is like Washington could not move the ball. Terry McLaurin had one catch. And the only thing I remember really is Saquon running all over them and Ertz having a stupid garbage time touchdown that didn't matter at the very, very end of the game. So I think this is a different matchup. And I kind of just erase all of that. Jaden was also hurt back then, so he's a lot healthier. The hardest thing I have in this game is I have no idea who the other options are on the Commanders side. Like Brian Robinson's a fine play if you want to play him in a home league, but you're not playing him in DFS this week, like confidently. Like if you want massive leverage, sure, but other than FanDuel, like he's kind of off my board in DK. And then I'm like, who else am I stacking Daniels with other than McLaurin? Tell me.
Kyle, I wish I could. It's tough. I think you could obviously play Jaden with Terry, and that would be the advisable thing to do. I also think
naked Jaden?
Yeah, I think you could play him naked. Yeah, you could just say the only way that they're going to win this game is if Jaden is Superman. And I kind of think that's the only way they win this game, because you think about the weapons he's lost, like, Eckler's not massive to the spread or anything like that, but like Eckler's a very good receiving back still at this point in his career. You lose Eckler, you might not have Zach Ertz in this spot. No Noah Brown, who's not incredible, but again, he's been better than Zacchaeus and these dudes, right? So like he doesn't have weapons besides Terry in the pass game. So the way it has to work, I think, is the rushing. And the last time these teams played, if you think about that primetime game on Thursday night, it was like 2 weeks after his rib injury. And it was kind of a trend of like 2 or 3 weeks in a row where his rushing was down. And after the game, everybody talked about why isn't Jaden running? The coaches were all asked about it. And like the next week, you saw them flip the switch. He was back to running the football a ton on that longer rest period after the Thursday night game. So I think the rushing component for Jaden Daniels is quite high this week. And I do think he can have success in that aspect of the game. So yeah, I like Jaden. It's just a matter of whether or not you want to include Terry or not. He's a little pricey. And obviously it's a pretty tough matchup, but I think if you're stacking him, that's kind of the only option in my opinion.
This game is at least condensed, where you're not really searching for all these random dudes. I mean, Jahan Dotson has so much revenge in his heart, and I respect that, but I probably won't be playing him because they don't even know if they're playing him this week. I think because the offenses are super condensed, like you're skinny stacking Jane Daniels, and then you're bringing it back with one other person on the Eagles side. Is it Saquon? Is it A.J. Brown? You can do that. Now, if you wanted to stack up Hurts, I think Grant Calcaterra is at least a cheap option you can add in the mix. He can pay off. He's seeing the snaps that we care about. But I don't know. I think the easiest click in this game is Saquon. I know he's expensive, but he destroyed the Commanders earlier this year. 198 total yards, 2 touchdowns. And this team wants to run the ball. And he's still on pace to break the record. So any injury concerns about Saquon?
Yeah, he kind of got a little banged up last week. There hasn't been any reporting on specifics here, but you saw a little bit more Kenny Gainwell than usual last week, which was good for our prop that we took and for your pick 6. But
a Kenny G prop, who knew?
Kenny Galladay. But No, nothing specific on the injury front. I'm interested to see what happens here on Thursday and Friday for his practice report. Make sure you're monitoring that. He got a veteran rest day on Wednesday, but as of now, no concerns on Saquon.
Yeah. So are you stacking up Eagles in this game? I know Devonta Smith was a do not practice on Wednesday. Do we know anything about Thursday?
Not yet.
Come on, buddy. We need you.
Come on, Devonta. I'll look while we look at the next game.
Okay. Yeah, I think that this spot for the Eagles is really, really clean for their two studs, Saquon and A.J. Brown. And so if you want to stack it up either way, like you're skinny stacking Jane Daniels, bring it back with one of those guys, or I'm playing Hurts in a passing option and Calcaterra is kind of in the mix. That's really my take here. But I also, if the Commanders had at least one other pass catcher that was healthy, if Eckler was healthy, if Noah Brown was healthy, it would make me want to take them in 3.5 points. I just think that at the end of the day, the Eagles are just a better team.
I do have an update. Every Eagles player on the 53-man roster is practicing today. So I will also take Philly minus 3.5.
The 3.5 is a terrible, terrible number to take. You don't feel great about it, but
no.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be a fun game. I'm excited about that one. Next one we're going to talk about is the Los Angeles Rams at the New York Jets, a game that I talked about earlier this week, a game where I said Jets plus 3.5, take it to the bank. Over-under is 46. I think it's a fun little matchup here, and I think what really works for us is that you know on the Jets side where the ball's going, you know on the Rams side where the ball's going, and so you're trying to figure out the combination of wide receivers of where you play them. Cooper Kupp, who goosed last week. We got a Kupp goose last week. He's
Nice.
only 6,500.
He's cheap. Very cheap. On FanDuel, they were like, no, you're not doing this. He's still 8,300 on FanDuel. So I think Stafford doubles on FanDuel are almost not, I don't want to say out of play because these guys are still very good and they have a ceiling, but that's a lot to pay for two wide receivers on the same team. So I kind of think it's out of play. But on DraftKings, when Kupp is at 6,500, I do think the Stafford double is in play.
I was looking at the way that these teams play, and the best thing about the Jets is they want to throw the ball. They're second in neutral pass rate, third in pass rate over expectation. And the Rams defense is one that you can throw on nonstop. So, I think Rodgers is a play that makes sense, but I never love clicking him in DFS because I just never think I'm getting a 30-point game. It's just not.
Till last week.
Did he have 30 points?
I think he had like 40, dude. He ran for 40 yards.
Yeah, that's not going to happen again.
Literally ever.
I think I looked up the stat. It's like his highest yardage in 8 years or something. But I just think that there are other quarterbacks that I'd rather stack up that have actual rushing floors that he doesn't. So I'll just pick the wide receivers here. And so I also think nobody's going to play Breece Hall. And his price tag is one of those places where you're like, why is he down at 6,100? This is a guy that we would have gladly paid up 7,500, a couple months ago. So the Jets' skill position players look really, really good, and I'm kind of interested in them. How much did he have last week?
Okay, I lied. It wasn't 40. That was Devonta Adams. He did have 30.1 DraftKings points.
Okay, so he barely hit 30. In his best game of his life for a while.
He ran for 45 yards on 6 carries last week. I mean, that's Jane Daniels type stuff right there from Rodgers.
It is, and what I'm going to go look up his rushing line.
That has to be the most ever for him.
It's not the most ever. I looked that up.
Really?
He's rushed he's rushed 4 or 5 games higher in his career.
Wow, go Rodgers. Yeah, I just think it's so funny, right? Like, my inclination is like, I played it last week because you talked me into it, and then as well, I was like, nobody's playing this, so
and I didn't play it.
Why not? Yeah, that's the better part. But now it's like you just saw it. You just saw the 90th percentile outcome a week ago. Do we think that's going to happen again? It's a good matchup, but if the field is going to play it, I would like to be underweight that in tournaments. Is my stance. Kind of the opposite of last week. But I'm just looking at like quick roster percentage checks here. I mean, because Richardson is 5,400 and because Penix is in play so cheap. I mean, Caleb's 5,500. Like, he's right there at 56. I can't see Rodgers being more than 6, 7, 8% most, right? So I do think it's okay.
Yeah. I started watching his documentary on
Is
Netflix.
it good?
And I mean, any documentary humanizes a person that goes from a player we click in an app and a player that's in the media to, okay, you kind of get the behind the scenes of like what the recovery process is like. And I feel like you'd like that part, PT stuff. It's good. I'm only in the first episode. Not a sponsor, by the way. Aaron Rodgers documentary.
Brought to you by Chili's and also this Netflix documentary.
It definitely humanized him a lot. So I'll let you know my thoughts later.
Yeah, I'm excited to check it out.
So in this game, Puka is an easy click because, well, he's leading the league in targets per out run, yards per out run. He's awesome. I do like the fact that the Jets are allowing the most slot fantasy points per game to wide receivers. So it gives a couple little boost on DK for me. I mean, he could PPR his way all the way there. Kyron's also going to get lost in the mix. So I feel like there's a couple of plays in this game that are going to get lost. So if you don't want to play the quarterbacks, correlating in this game is very, very easy to do, and it makes a ton of sense. Pick one person on the Rams side, pick someone on the Jets side, and you can move on. But the guys are at least cheap enough. So if you wanted to double stack Stafford, would you be double stacking Rodgers if you're stacking up that side?
Unless you're expecting
like
him to
Adams
run.
and Wilson.
Yes, unless you're expecting him to run for another 50 yards this week, which I am not. You should definitely double stack him. Yeah, because if he hits, I mean, Devontae was unbelievable in that second half last week, but he's going to bring two guys with him, almost certainly, right? And it's very likely to be Garrett Wilson. So yeah, I do think if you're going to play it, you should double stack and just lean into it.
Okay. Any other plays you like in this game?
I do think Kyron, if you wanted, like, the conversation on this game is the stacks are really exciting. Both guys could hit. This could be a high scoring affair. If it is not, the way it fails, in my opinion, is Kyron dominates in the game. Yeah, like Kyron's not a guy, he's not like Gibbs where he'll rip off a 50-yard play or a 60-yard screen pass.
Not at all.
He needs to kind of get there on 20 touches or whatever, and Sean McVay is going to kill this dude. Like last Thursday, unbelievable. 4 days after having another, 26 or 7 carries, whatever it was, he just loads them up with another 30 touches. So if that happens and you get that sort of game script, I'm not saying as ugly as last week, but you get that sort of thing, Kyron at 7,200 looks so strong. Nobody's going to play him this week, and if you want to say the Rams win, they cover the spread, and this game hits the under, I think Kyron's a great wipeout pick.
All right, my pick is Jets plus 3.5.
Kyle, you're buying high on the Jets. This is not the time to buy on the market with the Jets. We're going Rams -3, and Kyle's going to look silly on Tuesday.
Dude, you just got to watch the documentary. Come on, man.
then I'll be into the Jets. No, I'm so done with this Jets team. I cannot wait to move on to next year.
Dude, you played them like for a team that you said you hated. You were like, I got to play them.
And what's funny is when the first half was happening, I hated myself. I'm like, why? Why am I doing this again?
Because Devontae goosed, right?
He had nothing in the first half and then went for 40 in the second half. So yeah, the first half, hated myself. Second half, I'm like, kind of smart. But yeah, I'm done with this Jets team.
Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. There's nothing sweeter than baking cookies during the holidays. With Prime, I get all my ingredients delivered right to my door, fast and free, no last-minute store trips needed. And of course, I blast my favorite holiday playlist on Amazon Music. It's the ultimate soundtrack for creating unforgettable memories. From streaming to shopping, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into.
This episode is brought to you by AWS. Amazon Q Business is the new generative AI assistant from AWS. Many tasks can make business slow, like wading through mud. Help! Luckily, there's a faster, easier, less messy choice. Amazon Q can securely understand your business data to help you streamline tasks, like summarizing quarterly results or doing complex analyses in no time. Q got this. Learn what Amazon Q Business can do for you at aws.com/learn more.
All right, we got one more game that we're going to talk about, and I want to be super brief. I don't know if you feel this way, but the Cardinals at the Panthers is a matchup that I did not love in my metrics. And here's maybe the reason why. Okay, I went back like a sicko, and I went through every single show doc and every single pace of play article, And I realized that we have talked about the Cardinals way too dang much this year. I'm sending you these numbers right now.
It has been a lot.
We've talked about them but like by far the most of any team on this podcast in this segment, 9 times this year already.
Maybe that's why the Kyler stuff hurts so much. It's because it's like, the focus of the show. I have him in a lot of season-long leagues like Superflex and type stuff, so it's been so frustrating.
Yeah, I'm showing you the list right here of who we talked about the most. Bills, Bengals, Lions, Ravens. But like Cardinals way above the rest. Now, the teams that we haven't mentioned, we knocked a couple off the list today. Jets, Bears, we've done that. But we haven't broken down a game with the Giants. We haven't broken down a game with the Patriots, the Broncos, and the Browns.
Okay, maybe next week.
Yeah, maybe we did a Jameis game. Maybe I was wrong. Who knows?
Not sure. Probably.
I just don't like this game for a couple of reasons. One, the pace metrics are really, really bad. Like if you take out the game that Carolina had, it was against Tampa Bay. They went to overtime a couple weeks ago. They're bottom 10 in combined plays per game. Arizona, their games combined for the 4th fewest plays per game, and they have their rush rate is just monster when they're getting the lead. So if you think they are leading in this game, the overall play volume just goes down, and I just don't know what you're hoping this game is going to be back and forth. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely share those concerns with you in that aspect. The thing that's tricky is it's not like either pass defense is good, but like recently over the last 6 weeks, these are the number 1 and number 2 worst, in other words, 31st and 32nd ranked success rate teams against the run. So I'm pretty sure Chuba's going to have a solid day, and I think James Conner's going to have a great day. And if those two things happen, like you're saying, there is concern about the overall pass volume, play volume. The game clock's going to tick. This one could be over kind of quick. So, that was a nice rhyme. So
well done.
From a game theory standpoint, however, if Conner's going to be super popular and nobody wants to play Kyler because he was popular last week and he randomly will spike for 25 points, just randomly, I don't hate it, especially with T. McBee due for a touchdown. Marv is 5,400 on DraftKings. Like, it's been rough. 5,400 is a nice tag for Marvin Harrison Jr. So I do have some interest in tournaments if the field is not going to play it.
Yeah, for me, if I'm stacking this game, it's Kyler with T. McBee or Marv, and then bring it back with Chuba. And then I'm moving on. Thielen is too expensive in a game that probably doesn't shoot out. That's my problem.
5,600, it's fine. But like typically when I play these guys in that range, like last week, I think Brian Thomas was like 5,800. Like those are the kind of plays I'm trying to identify. Like Darnell Mooney sometimes in that range. In other weeks, like you can see the spike of 25, 26 points.
Best ball king, Darnell
Mooney. Yeah. Probably didn't help anybody advance last week because he had the same points. The same points as you and me. But Thielen doesn't have that archetype for a floor, sure, but yeah, just for DFS, I'm never really super excited.
Yeah. All right. So I'm not playing Bryce. Jalen Coker had a long touchdown last week. People chase that. No, thank you. All right. I think I'm taking the under here. I think they're just bad. They're inefficient offenses.
I got to play for you. Trey McBride, anytime touchdown, is a stone cold lock this week, Kyle. Okay?
At plus 135, right?
No, plus 210. Which is what we took it at.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's totally fine. All right, let's blitz through these other games. Those are the main games that we went through. If you wanted to play, let's do this quick. A Bills onslaught stack. So they have a 30-point team implied total. They've scored 30, 8 straight games. How would you play that?
Yeah, they're gonna score. They're 14-point home favorites against the Patriots. So obviously on DraftKings, when you're looking at the pricing structure for Josh Allen, he's 8,700. It's not like you can't get to it. It's just that when you stack him, it's a complete headache. It's like, who is it? Last week it was Amari for everybody, and he goosed. Khalil Shakir, pops up for fine games every now and then. Dalton Kincaid randomly came back to the lineup and had a nice game, but I feel like this week it's randomly going to be Mac Hollins and Curtis Samuel. You just don't know. I have the numbers here in front of us with like the routes run and stuff. Everybody on the team that is a tight end or wide receiver ran 24 or fewer routes last week on 36 dropback. So it is a full-blown rotation. So if you want to say, like, I know better, I'm going to play this dude, do it. Nobody's playing him. But for me, it's either Josh Allen naked or Josh Allen with James Cook. And you just say, I'm getting access to hopefully all of the Bills' touchdowns this week, and I'm not worried about where it goes with Allen. That's my preference.
Yeah, and with the defense being, I don't know, I think people will pay up for them to be chalky. You just kind of go against that. Like, I probably won't be playing Buffalo defense in that sort of thing. All right, Sunday night on FanDuel is an interesting game. We're not going to highlight that game like in an article or anything, but Tampa Bay at Dallas needs to be in your player pool. And if you're playing on FanDuel, and there's just a lot of options. I mean, Cooper Rush has kind of quietly been okay and really good against the blitz. And Todd Bowles is like one of the dudes that blitzes the most. So I think there's enough there in that game that you could kind of go back and forth. Now, I'd want to stack up Baker, bring it back with CeeDee. That would be the way to do it. But it's at least a game to put on your radar. Yeah,
definitely. And if you need late swap in FanDuel, remember that game exists. Sometimes I forget myself. Rico is super cheap. He's 7,300. Like you talked about, Cooper Rush is 7K. That's a really nice tag. We're monitoring a couple injuries on the Bucs side of things. Cade Otton banged up this week, unfortunately.
He'll be there. He's a gamer.
He always shows up. But like Jalen McMillan is 5,800. He's super cheap. Nobody's going to play him. And I think Bucky at 7,800 is like too expensive to be in the first cut for cash games over there, but a really strong tournament play if nobody's going to play him because, well, you can run on Dallas, and we know he's explosive. So I think Bucky's a really fun tournament play for that Sunday night hammer.
Slate Breaker of the Week.
All right, I went back and forth about my Slate Breaker this week, but I've landed on a guy named Arthur Juwan Brown. That's A.J. Brown. I just think this matchup is great. We talked about his price being lower than it's been, most of the year. He's seen 51% of the team's air yard share versus cover 3, which is what the Commanders have done recently more and more. That's second best in the league. And last year, he was top 5 in almost every single metric imaginable against cover 3. Last year against these Commanders, 41.5 DK points, 36 DK points. And I think he's the player that on the road, I think it's going to be a competitive game. I think A.J. Brown is set up just to smash.
I like it. I don't think he's going to get played at all this week. I am also going to go with a contrarian play. I had a couple of names on the list that I was interested in. I'm going to go with Jonathan Taylor.
Oh, man, did not see that coming.
I know. We didn't talk about the game. And part of the reason is a game theory aspect of just massive leverage on Anthony Richardson, who's in the cash conversation. Those guys are always popular. So if it's Taylor that hits this week, he's sub 7K, right? I mean, he had the boneheaded play where he dropped the ball at the goal line last week. And if he converted that touchdown, I think we'd be paying a lot more for him this week. So I will take the little discount here, 6,900. They're at home. They're favored. They're taking on Mason Rudolph and the Titans. It's just like, let's give this guy 20 touches against the Titans at home and see what happens. So give me Jonathan Taylor at, I think, probably sub 10% this week in tournaments.
It's time for Borg versus Betz, presented by DraftKings.
You don't have a sportsbook? No problem. You can play DraftKings Pick 6 with us. Last week, we were 3-2. The kicker prop might have let us down, but on the season, we're at 58% combined together, my friend. It's been a good little moment for us. And I want to start us off by listing a player that maybe you didn't even know. I didn't even think he'd have a prop, but he's
shocked
here once again.
That this exists.
Oh man, sometimes you got to dig deep. Tanner Hudson, who is really a preseason legend. If you ever play preseason DFS, Tanner Hudson is tight end for the Cincinnati Bengals. His receiving yards line is 6.5. I will be taking the more. He has hit the more in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 straight games. And his snap percentages and routes, ignore that. Please ignore that. Because what matters for Tanner Hudson is that he is a TPRR king. Like targets per out run, this dude is always crushed. He's at 35% over those 6 games. So really, you're just asking for one catch from Tanner Hudson.
You're a sick individual, Kyle. But
KG last week, Tanner Hudson this week.
I love Tanner Hudson. Yes, I played him a bunch in DFS in preseason, and he's like the dude you click first in your lineup. He's great. I'm actually kind of surprised he hasn't gotten more opportunity in the league with production and stuff. I will take a less on Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Give me the less on 210.5 pass yards. Last year, he played 3 games as a starter. He completed 53% of his passes for 3.9 yards per attempt. That is abysmal. And yes, we should leave room for our minds that he might get better. And it's a good matchup against the Bengals. But truthfully, I think this offense has so much systemic failure. I'm very worried about the Browns this week. So give me less than 210.5 on DTR.
I was shocked his line was above 200. 199, somewhere around there, makes more sense. So I think this line is way too high. Last year, check those. That's wild. So somebody in risk management is getting fired.
He's going to come
somebody out there.
He's going to come out there for 250 this week, isn't he?
DTR, man? Nah, dude. He'll get replaced mid-game. They'll be like, oh, this is a bad idea.
No, I think they want to lose.
Yeah, that's true. Kyler Murray, less than 1.5 passing touchdowns. He has played 14 games this year. He's hit the less in 11 of them. That is a 79% hit rate. It's kind of like what we did with Geno the week before. Carolina's allowing the most rushing touchdowns in the NFL, and Arizona's top 10 in rush rate inside the red zone and neutral rush rate. This team wants to run the ball. When they're getting close, it's Connor. It leaves room for one Trey McBride touchdown.
We only need one, baby. That's fine. All right, I will take Josh Allen less than half of an interception. So in other words, he's not going to throw a pick. He's played well this year, obviously the MVP. In all of his games, 5 interceptions on the year. Buffalo, for me, is a spot where this is going to be a heavy rush rate situation. They are 14-point home favorites against the Patriots. The Patriots have faced the 6th highest rush rate when games were within 1 score. And when the Bills have been up by 7+, their rush rate is 60%. When they're up by 10+, it is 63%. So if they get a lead, I think you're going to see a ton of running back carries here, which means we shouldn't see a bunch of pass attempts from Allen, and he'll protect the football. So give me less than half an interception.
All right, bonus kicker prop here. It's Cairo Santos of the Bears. His line is very low for a kicker, if you didn't know. It's at 5.5 kicking points. I will be taking the more. On sportsbooks in a lot of places is minus 135, but on Pick 6, you don't have to pay that. He's been over in 9 of 14 games, and they have a 21-point team implied total. So if you get 2 field goals, you get there. If you get a field goal and some other stuff, we can talk about that too.
Some other stuff.
Please get there, Cairo.
Come on, Cairo. You can do it, buddy.
Yeah, I need a kicker prop to work. That was Borg versus Betz presented by DraftKings Pick 6. Download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use the code BALLERS.
Ballers.
That's code BALLERS for new customers to play $5 and get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Bets. Sign the people off because my kids are getting off the bus as we speak.
We did it. For Kyle's kids, for his dog who made his first podcast appearance, for Jonathan Taylor, who might break the slate. Hopefully you guys have an awesome weekend. Good luck. Enjoy the Saturday football. Enjoy the Sunday football. And of course, we'll be back for DraftKings on Monday Night Football in our DK League. We'll see you then. Have a great weekend. Good luck.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits expire in 6 months. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.